Hi everyone, and welcome to this lesson on essay practice and additional material. This video is relevant for those students studying their area of study in Year 11 ESL English. So, let's look at our plan for our lesson today. In order to achieve success in writing an essay, we've already looked over the basic structure and format in writing this essay. However, you need to improve your essays by choosing additional material to increase the quality and to differentiate yourself from every other candidate. So today, we'll be looking at the golden rules for choosing related material. We'll also be looking at where to look for related material and also how to use related material. So these three things are what we'll be examining in specific detail. So, how can you use related material in essays? As you know, in ESL your essay is going to include 3 texts. Now, this is going to be 2 set texts and then 1 related text. When you're looking at your set text, you have the advantage of your teacher doing all the analysis with you. However, with your related text, you're a bit on your own. You on your own have to find a text and then analyze it for techniques, quotes, and everything else which you need for your essay. And this can be quite daunting. However, this video is going to explain exactly how you can do this and really make you prepared for this process. So, choosing related texts is important because you can easily use these in your essay to improve their quality. You can easily find a suitable text by following these guidelines. So let's examine these. How can you find related material? There are a couple of different techniques which you can use in order to make sure that the related material that you're looking for isn't just an endless search. Because sometimes it can seem a bit scary. There are so many options for related material, you don't know what to choose. Let's look at some techniques in which you can find them. The first of these is to keep a scrapbook. So if you ever see a piece of potential related material, you can just glue it into that book and have a really solid resource of potential text which you can sift through later on. You can also then record the date, author, source, and context of that source so that you can make sure you can always use it in essays and have enough background information to use it later. You can also search for text by famous authors, and you can either do this online or at your school library or local library. Anywhere like that where you can get some information on potential texts and do a bit of research into them before you read the entire thing, just to make sure that it's appropriate before you spend hours reading a complicated text. You can also ask your teachers, tutors, and parents for suggestions because obviously they're experienced in selecting related texts and might have some really good ideas about texts which are appropriate for your area of study. So, what should you look for when finding a related text? Now, there's this old saying called fool's gold, which we find really relevant to your related texts. Obviously, you're out there on your own looking for a text, so it can be pretty easy to be distracted by texts which you think are really promising, but really at the end of the day aren't. And then you're wasting your time reading a text and analysing it before you realise that it just doesn't have enough about your ESL area of study to be relevant, and you've wasted your time. So we're avoiding this fool's gold, misleadingly good texts. Instead, if we follow this guide for related material, you're going to find a good text which you can really use successfully. It's really important that you don't just use texts because they're your favourite or because a friend or teacher recommended them. This can be a bit misleading, but just because a text is good doesn't mean it's necessarily relevant for your thematic study or that it at all links with your set texts, because it's really important that you have a relationship between your set text and your related text, and sometimes suggestions that teachers, friends, or the internet makes just aren't wary of these other factors which only you personally can consider. So, why are related texts important? Now, it's really a useful technique to think about the marker as a judge. So like a judge in a court trial making a decision. Now, the marker is going to be judging you on how suitable the text is to your area of study. You want to make sure that suitable is the key word here. It really needs to be appropriate in a number of levels. It needs to be appropriate level of difficulty. So you need to make sure that you demonstrate to the marker that yes, you understand the text. So you don't want to choose a text that's too difficult, but at the same time, you don't want to choose a text that's too easy, which makes the marker think that you've taken the easy way out. You also need to show the marker whether you use the text well in an essay. So even if you found a great text, that's no guarantee that you're going to use it well. There's definitely a process of reading and analysis and practice, which will make sure that you can use that great text that you've found in a really good way. And working on your expression and your language skills in ESL is obviously really going to help you in this process. So let's look at the golden rules for selecting related material. Now, these golden rules are obviously the same across the board, and they're relevant to all levels of English, but you can particularly apply them to ESL when you're looking for texts in a language which maybe you're not that familiar with. So let's just look at them now. The first rule is that your text type should be different from your two prescribed texts. So you guys know what a text type is. Basically what I'm saying here is that if in class you've been studying a series of poems, your related text isn't going to be a poem. You're going to try and find a play or a novel or a short story. So you really want a bit of variation in your essay, just for the sake of having an interesting essay. You don't want it to be too much of the same thing. Secondly, while they're a bit difficult, it's really a good idea to choose a classic, and that can either be an older classic which is about 50 years old or older, or a contemporary classic which are about 10 to 20 years old. So a really good example of this sort of classic which you can choose is Animal Farm by George Orwell, because it's not only a classic and a really respected novel, but it's one which is at an appropriate difficulty level that you will definitely be able to read and then write about. The third rule is to avoid very simple texts, even if they seem the easiest. So sometimes you might be misleadingly lured into choosing a really simple text and you think, yeah, this is great, it's going to be really easy to analyse, but that's definitely not the case, because it's not going to provide you with enough material to write an essay. And if you don't have enough material, you're not going to be able to write an essay that's the right length. So you want to be avoiding cartoons, children's books, short poems, and ensuring that you skip those factors. The fourth issue is surrounding what your related text should actually be. It's really important that it firstly supports your core texts, which you study in class, as well as having something new to say. So you don't want it to just almost repeat what your core text said, but you also want it to actually have something new and interesting to say, so that you're not always repeating yourself, but that you always have fresh and interesting ideas. The fifth rule is to avoid pop culture or teen and children's themes or books. So basically you want to be avoiding the things which everyone in society out there might be reading, and which you might be reading for leisure and for fun, but that isn't really that good for related text at the end of the day. So you want to be avoiding things like Twilight, Harry Potter, Transformers, anything that's Disney related, and that's especially relevant to cartoons, and also anime. So if you avoid these things, you're going to be avoiding texts which are simple, cliche, and just a little bit too overdone for them to be appropriate for your essay. Now, this guide to using related material is really going to be helpful for you in both structuring your essays and also knowing what to do next, because you've found your related material, but you're probably asking, what do I do with it? How do I analyze it? How do I make sense of this massive book or this movie that I've chosen? So there are basically three approaches which you can use and that we'll go through. You really need to make sure that you have about an 80-20 split between your set text and your related material. So what you want to have is about 40% of your essay spent on your first set text, 40% on your second, and then 20% on your related text. That's about the appropriate weighting which the markers are looking for. You also want to make sure you have about 2 paragraphs for your related text. That's about an appropriate amount, which is going to be good for this essay in particular. So in structuring these essays, there are a number of techniques which you can use in order to make sure that your essays make sense and that they're logical. So the first of these is the block method, and this is really the easiest method, so the method I recommend for you to practice with at the beginning, especially if you're working with text which you haven't been studying for very long. So each paragraph is going to be discussing one idea in one text only. This is the easiest to write and it's the most logical, basically just because like blocks, you're really breaking it up. You're having it all in very distinct stages and there's not too much linking or analysis required between the texts. This means that you'll have 4 paragraphs on your set text, 4 on your second set text, and then about 2 on your related text. So that's going to ensure that you have that 80-20 balance which we were discussing earlier. So if you look at this sample of a block method essay, paragraphs 1 to 4 would be focusing on your set text, which is your first set text. Then paragraphs 5 to 8 are going to be focusing on your second set text, with paragraphs 9 and 10 focusing on your related text. If you can write that many paragraphs, this is definitely the way to go with structure, but you can always reduce the number of paragraphs if you don't think you have that writing speed up to the standard which you'll have in Year 12 yet. The integrated block method is a second method which you can use, and it's one which is really good because it combines the easiness of the block method with the sophistication of the integrated method, which we'll look at in a second. So basically what this means is you're providing one idea in one text per paragraph. You're providing the same number of paragraphs as in the block essay, except you're alternating them a little bit. So you're putting them almost as different alternating coloured layers rather than just having them in big chunks in your essay. And then you're providing links between your paragraphs through your topic sentences. So this is something you can practice and work on. So if we look at this plan for an integrated block essay for ESL, what you're looking at is paragraph 1 and 2 on set text 1, paragraph 3 and 4 on set text 2, and paragraph 5 on your related text. That will all probably relate to one theme which you see in common. Then you're moving on to paragraph 6 and 7, which will be on your set text 1, this time addressing a new theme, paragraphs 8 and 9 on your set text 2, and paragraph 10 on your related text. So this next chunk is relating on a different theme to what you did at the beginning. So you've still got 2 themes in your essays, you're still looking at all 3 texts, you're just mixing up the structure of the essay a little bit. The third method is called the integrated approach, and this one's a little bit tricky because basically what you're looking at is one topic in one paragraph only, but making sure that you discuss the set text and then the additional material in the same paragraph. So instead of splitting up your text between different paragraphs, you're mashing them all together in one paragraph. So some students are able to include all 3 texts in that one paragraph. You could also do the integrated approach perhaps with 2 texts, alternating those. If we look at this sample for an integrated essay, paragraphs 1 to 10 would all be the same in structure, in that in each paragraph you'd include set text 1, set text 2, and your related text, each paragraph looking on a different theme, or perhaps having like 3 to 4 themes and having 2 paragraphs on each of those themes. So that's the way you're going with the integrated approach. So as regards to structuring these essays, it's really valuable if you make a plan in advance, especially when you're getting a little bit complicated with the way you're structuring your essays through the integrated block or integrated approach. It can be a bit confusing to sit down and just start writing. So what I really advise is the skeleton plan. What is this? Well, a skeleton plan is the first draft of any essay, and it basically includes subtitles, dot points, keywords, technique terms, and quotes, which you can all use as the basic structure of your essay once you start to write it. This is going to make sure you basically have a sheet with resources which you can then use once you write your essay, which means when you're writing an essay you're not going to be flicking through your book and your class notes, but it's all going to be there on one easy page, which will mean you can focus on things like expression and language. So that brings us to the end of our lesson today on writing a thematic essay and how to choose that related material which you can put in your thematic essay, and then structuring that thematic essay to include your related material. If you follow the rules which we've discussed in choosing the material, and then also the rules which we've discussed in structuring that material into your essays, you're going to produce a really sophisticated essay no matter what method you choose to use.